All right, ladies and gentlemen, I had a swig of water, so now I'm ready to continue with My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen. So let's go ahead and get the formalities out of the way, shall we? Yo, peoples! Kyushu92 here, and welcome to yet another My Hero Academia chapter reaction and review. In the last chapter, we got a little bit of history of Shoji and how he was basically being a heteromorphic person. He was ostracized and all, beaten up and abused simply because of the way he looked, as he's fighting Stinger, who's grown so incredibly dull in mind that he's basically a Neanderthal at this point. All while this big spider member of the Para-Liberation Army is trying to goad these people into, assaulting the central hospital where Kurogiri is. And as Shoji is fighting, Kota comes up, and the little horn that's on his head opens up, and he's able to, communicate to more birds to surround the spider person as they both fight Spinner and this one spider individual. So, the thing about this is, we are going on break for My Hero Academia. We're not going on break for One Piece, but we're going on break for My Hero. And it begins with chapter 372, where Shoji and Kota are talking to Aizawa and All Might as Shoji goes, "Please assign us to defending Central Hospital." And then they're both looking like, "How did you know about that?" "How did you find out? We never told you about that." And then it cuts to that one heteromorphic lady that was saved by Midoriya way before all this stuff went down. As Shoji says, "That large woman said some troubling things, so I asked her more about what's going on out there." "Oh, right, the big lady. Plus, some of the refugees mentioned something about a call to action. That's how we learned that a group of heteromorphs are going after the hospital." And then Kota says,
"If Shoji's going, then so am I."
"Standing back while this plays out would mean I could never call myself a hero." Chapter 372, Naked. And it shows Aizawa closing his eyes as he goes, "We spread false rumors about where he was transferred, but the enemy didn't take the bait." And this is when he was talking to President Mike before all this stuff went down. "Yamada, I hate to ask, but can you be there to support the boys?" And President Mike is there after apprehending a ton of heteromorphic people that were trying to make their way to the Central Hospital. "Know this, Aizawa-sensei. They say quirks get stronger by the generation." And these kids, no, these young men are already way stronger than we were back in our day, as the three dumb Bigos. And it shows that Shoji is combining his quirk to become a massive fist, like combining his multi-arms and multi-limbs into one massive fist to punch at Spinner, while Kota is summoning thousands upon thousands of birds to surround this one spider dude that's been trying to egg on and goad the civilians. "No, these young men are already way stronger than we were back in our day, as the three Dumigos." And it shows Kota. It shows Kota with like a new horn structure as he is. We see a little bit of his backstory, and I guess he's talking to his mom.
"One day, Koji, your horns might grow too. And with these horns, you'll be able to beam your thoughts and feelings to animals that are even farther away."
And then it cuts to Kota's dad as he goes, "Your mama has had to put up with some real cruelty because of the way she looks, but your dad got so riled up on my behalf. He told those awful people not to mock my amazing horns."
"Koji, it's okay to be mad. Grow up to be a man who gets mad when people mock something or someone dear to them."
And then, and then it shows President Mike yelling in the direction of where they are as Kota uses Hitchcock birds, and then Shoji uses Octo Spansion! And after hitting Spinner, I believe Spinner gets hit by President Mike's voice, because with Koda's Hitchcock birds, he knocks off the spider guy that was on top of the building, and Shoji is able to actually land a hit on Spinner. And it's enough to shatter that so-called scale mail he had on his body. What will you choose to protect with those scales in that giant body? Tell me, Spinner! The rest of you too! What are you hoping to protect with your gifts and your power? And then he's thinking of Aoyama. And he yells up, don't let them exploit your wounds! Your children might be the next target! And that's when some of the people stop. And then he's just thinking back to the little girl he saved. If I'd never... the girl going,
If I never fell in that river, they never would have hurt your face and made it all scary.
Be better than mere Avengers! And then it cuts to Spinner, who's still in the air as he yells out, the grudge never fades! The grudge never fades. And then it cuts to the civilians who are still calling him Rep, going, Rep! If heroes win the day, nothing will ever change. Oh, it's the call to action we heard that night. For the crime of walking in public, they sprayed me with pesticide. When they hit us, we hit them back. Brethren, be heard and follow me! As it shows him launching off of a wall straight towards the central hospital, enough to crack the entire wall he's on. He's on a side of a building, and he just cracks it from the force of it. And then it cuts to Shoji, who's getting kind of held up by some of the birds that Koda called along. Even stronger now, with enough power to crack that concrete? And then some of the civilians who are looking around basically look, and they just get up in arms all over again. They're even more fired up. Too many of them! Can't take much more. And before that happens, a gun is shown in a panel. And then it shows the inside of the central hospital. It shows the inside of the central hospital. And then it shows Spinner completely crashing through the central hospital. And then it shows the inner thoughts of Spinner, who can't think. This is All For One, who's telling this to Spinner in the past. Kurogiri was transferred to the research wing. Once you reach him, play a recording of either my or Tomura's voice. Kurogiri's quirk will bring this conflict to an end. And then it shows Spinner bursting inside. It shows him bursting inside of the hospital along with some of the civilians who are in tow. And then it shows some people standing in a distance, possibly doctors and nurses, as one civilian just looks at him. And Spinner's thinking, all for Tomura's sake, you will become a hero. And then it shows this pig-faced looking man looking at these civilians, and all of these nurses, and they're just looking at him. And he's thinking back to when I believe he's seen someone else in the hospital. Either he was or someone he knows was in the hospital. And then it cuts to Spinner again. I thought I'd never get to be anyone, but by following you, I really can be somebody. Shigaraki, just watch me. I've got my allies behind me. And as he's running, it doesn't show anyone actually behind him. Then it cuts to Spinner, who's running down this corridor. Shoji must have gotten through to them. And listen, that guy in there ain't gonna be your ace in the hole. Oh wait, someone's in this tunnel with him. Shoji must have gotten through to him. And listen, that guy in there ain't gonna be your ace in the hole. Yo, and it's Spinner and Present Mike as they burst into the room. They burst into the room where Kurogiri is. Wow, they're in the room with Kurogiri right now. As Spinner screams out, Kurogiri! And then President Mike screams, Shirakumo! And then it just shows Shirakumo Kurogiri just sitting there to be continued. Who is he going to respond to? That's the question. Interesting. Very interesting. So this chapter actually went by fairly fast. I want to say fairly fast, but because so much happened, we got new super moves from Shoji, and we got a new super move from Koda, who was able to call upon hundreds of birds to assault the spider member, so he's out. Then Spinner gets hit by what was it called again? What was that move called again? Octospansion. And it was enough to crack the plate mail. Now, in the process, Shoji does get hurt a little bit. Like there's cuts that cut across him. And as he's trying to yell at these people to like be better than this, they all get kind of silent, and then Spinner kind of gets riled up, and he launches towards the central hospital, and that causes the civilians to run after him, thinking like, oh, that's our rep. He wants us to do this. But my thing is, apparently, I think one of these civilians had a gun. Because one thing I didn't notice during this was in that panel it shows someone holding a gun, and then it shows a bang happen, like someone shot the gun. So someone's been shot. I don't know who, but someone's been shot. And then it shows Spinner and the civilians bursting into the hospital. And as one of the civilians looks at the nurses and doctors out of there, and Spinner takes off on his own, he's saying, like, I got my allies behind me, thinking to himself that he has these people supporting him, but Spinner's the only one who's actually running into the hospital, because all of the civilians that followed him have stopped. And some of them, I notice here that they pretty much dropped the weapons that they came in with to try and take things over. Yeah, they're done. The civilians are done. They basically just stopped right before, like, the nurses and doctors and everybody. Like, Spinner makes his way into the wing itself, the inpatient ward. Oh, I know what happened. Because it shows that Spinner was running towards the nurses and doctors who are standing in the way of the inpatient ward, and it shows them being stalwart and not moving. Then it shows Spinner. Then it shows what looks to be like a surprised or horrified look on the face of the pig-faced guy who saw all these civilians as they dropped their weapons. And then it just shows Spinner running past deeper into the inpatient ward. So what this tells me, this visual storytelling tells me, is that Spinner barreled through these unarmed nurses and doctors to get into the inpatient ward, and it was enough to make all the civilians stop and rethink themselves, because this is exactly what Shoji was talking about. Who knows how many people may have possibly been seriously injured by Spinner running straight through them, because remember, he's still covered in the scale mail, which is sharp and is able to injure people just by them being touched by it. It's like extremely sharp and a way for Spinner to defend himself. That's a secondary quirk that All For One gave him. He ran through those nurses and doctors, and the sight of that was enough to cause every single civilian that was right behind Spinner when he burst in through the hospital to just stop. Because this is not what they signed up for. They didn't sign up to harm nurses and doctors. Yet Spinner did it, and it was enough to make them make the civilians, the heteromorphic civilians, drop their weapons and everything and just stop following him. Because when Spinner's running, he's going like, but by following you, I thought I'd never get to be anyone, but by following you, maybe I really can be somebody. Shigaraki, just watch me. I've got my allies behind me. But in this specific panel, it shows like a childlike Spinner on his own running, saying he has his allies behind him, but there's no one behind him because he's lost those allies due to what he just did. Now, we don't get shown what happens, but by the visual storytelling, the civilians were pretty much shown the ferocity and the heartlessness and the ruthlessness that Spinner just showed in this state by going through these doctors and nurses to get to Kurogiri. Like I said, this is not what these people were signed up for. They were signed up for to usher in change for heteromorphs everywhere, but the thought of injuring doctors and nurses, people who are unarmed and not actually trying to harm them in any way, that was not on the itinerary. That was not on the program. And that action alone that Spinner just did was enough to make them rethink their actions. That's a really interesting read of the situation. You may have had me you may have me convinced. I was so confused reading this. The only other interpretation I've seen is that Mike has the gun. Either he has the gun or someone else did. Because if he had the gun outside and he used it to get their attention, they probably would have stopped outside. But it shows the civilians walking inside of the destroyed opening of the Central Hospital along with Spinner. And they are all following Spinner until he charges forward, and then they all stop after seeing what he just did. Because he just starts running deeper and deeper into the impatient ward where Kurogiri is, and he's met face to face with President Mike. Where they both come into where Kurogiri is and they shout out his name. Spinner calls him Kurogiri, and President Mike calls him Shirakumo. But what you're saying sounds so raw and powerful, and it took my breath away a little. Really? See, here's one thing I can say about not One Piece, but My Hero Academia. It causes me to really analyze these scenes, especially when I go back to it. Because I was just thinking to myself, why did they all stop? Did they stop after seeing how serious these nurses and doctors were? But then I thought about it and realized that they still weren't following Spinner after he was running through and saying, I got my allies behind me, but they were nowhere to be seen. And then it just shows the surprised look on the face of one of these this thing, whatever it is, it's on my eye. It's just sitting there and it's causing me to blink irregularly. But that's what pops into my head. It's just a theory of mine, but I feel like that's what happened. Because after all the talking that Shoji did to make them realize that this is pointless. What you're trying to force is not going to happen. It's not going to bring about any beneficial change. And then this fact gets all this blood, sweat, and tears that you're trying to shed in order to make change happen, specifically the blood part where you're going to harm people in order to see change happen. You can say you're ready for that, but when you're in the face of seeing that carnage happen in front of you, it's enough to make people rethink themselves and maybe, no longer following their so-called rep. Think about it. People can say they're ready for something until they're face first in front of it. That seeing this so-called ferocity that you expect from your rep directly in front of your eyes, that you weren't expecting to see before. You weren't expecting him to barrel through innocent people. You're already second-guessing the reason why you're even there in the first place and what it has to do with the Central Hospital. But to potentially see this man run through and potentially seriously injure these innocent people who are just here to help other people. Imagine what that does to the very, very reason why you're there in the first place. That's what I feel happened. Because it was enough for them to just drop their weapons. Because the nurses and doctors, they're not armed. They're just standing with their arms linked together in front of the inpatient ward, as if to say, we're not going to budge an inch to make sure you can't get through. Yet Spinner got through. And seeing as how he's not in his right mind, he's not thinking rationally, he's basically a Neanderthal at this moment. He probably brute forced his way straight through them, and all the civvies that were traveling with him saw him for what he really is. The monster that they're trying to convince the world they are not. That would be a really powerful way for Hori to prove his point. I'm for it. Also, if you notice, there are humanoids and heteromorphs holding hands, defending the hospital in a sign of silent peace. Exactly. This so-called inequality that they're trying to fight for is already present. They see it with a regular person and like this dude that looks like a bird, a heteromorphic bird dude holding arms with them. And they're all intermingled into all of this hospital faculty group. So that already disproves their point that they're trying to make by doing this. They're already disproving the point that they've been riled up to go against. That would be a strong metaphor for what mob mentality and tribalism do to people. It really is. Horikoshi really does know how to write out these events and these different types of subject matter in a very skillful way, I have to say. He really does a good job of it. He doesn't even have to say much during panels. He can just, visual storytelling does so much. That's why I came up with this whole hypothesis in the first place. Because it seems like the one thing that can get every civilian to stop doing what they're doing. The very person they're following is behaving like the monster they think the world sees them as. And that's what they're trying to not do. They're trying to make the world see them different than a monster. Yet Spinner behaves just like one in front of their eyes. And it makes them second guess everything that they're doing right now. This is a good chapter. I love My Hero Academia. I wouldn't be surprised if people just psychoanalyze the entire series once it's over. But my goodness, I'm so glad we're cutting to these moments with people like Shoji and Koda and these other members that's helping us tie up these loose ends for My Hero Academia. Next has got to be either Aoyama and Fat Gum or Uraraka and Asui. Or the other heroes that are facing off against the real All For One as he's slowly being rewound out of existence. There's still some loose ends to tie up, but we're eventually going to get to it. All I can say was this was a greatly written chapter. I enjoyed this chapter. I also like it when Horikoshi goes knee-deep into this and the storytelling and the visual storytelling that you can just glean so much off of. Now, we gotta wait a whole week. We're going on break for My Hero Academia. Luckily, I'll have Sonic and God of War to keep me occupied, but actually managed to catch another stream? Yeah, facts. My Hero is a symbolic unpacking of modern society, and it's fascinating. It's a good chapter, and it's a good series. This is a good chapter and a good series. There's so much that people can glean and learn from this story. Even Marvel Comics can learn some things from Horikoshi when it comes to writing characters in a good way. Because let's face it, Marvel really hasn't been on their best game for a long time now. Sure, they've released some things such as the Hulk comics after Immortal Hulk and Thor after the events of him being Herald Thor. And there are some good things that come out of Marvel concerning when Donny Cates writes, but when it comes to subject matter, it seems like it's really heavy-handed when it comes from Marvel. Yet we have Horikoshi. We have Horikoshi writing these stories out in subject matter we've seen before, but it's not so heavy-handed and it's like he's got to beat you over the head for you to understand it. It's done in a skillful way that doesn't come off as forced. And that's what I love about his writing. He's not trying to pander or trying to criticize you or even trying to mansplain to you. He does it, he explains things in a way for you to understand and, be sympathetic, because it's very rare for me to be sympathetic for villains in stories. Yet Horikoshi has managed to make it so that you can sympathize with literally every single villain in this story except for All for One and possibly Stain. Those are the only ones. But he writes it so skillfully, though. And it just makes me more and more excited to read the next chapter. But let me not leave you here. Let me not talk your ears off. Very curious to see how things wrap up, and I'm so excited to see the payoff for all the plot lines built up for so long. I can't wait. I wonder where we're gonna end up with My Hero Academia when it's the final day of 2022. Will we still be in My Hero Academia, or will everything be tied up? Only time will tell. But all I can say is I'm just very excited to see where My Hero Academia is going to go as a whole moving forward, and I can't wait to be here to read and react to these chapters for all of you. Let me not keep you here any longer than I already have, because I got to get started on Jujutsu Kaisen, and then I'm just going to rest for the rest of the day. I'm going to go out and get myself something to eat, a big old sandwich. I'm going to get me one of those. But before that, I'm going to continue with Jujutsu. So all I can say to everyone here, Midoriya, M2 hit. I don't even know how to properly say your name. M2, glad you guys were here. Glad I was able to talk to you guys about My Hero Academia, and just know that this is my joy. This is my talent. This is my gifting to do this, and I love it. Thank you for helping me make this my full-time job as it is right now, and I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to do this. So all I can say at the end of the day is, hope you all enjoyed. Can't wait to see you all in my... Just M2 is fine. Yeah, I was going to go with M2. But hope you all enjoyed. Can't wait to see you all in my next video. And if you're new to the channel... Wow, I never noticed that my light was so bright. If you're new to the channel and you enjoyed what you saw here today, then like, subscribe, and maybe even consider becoming a member, because I am always looking forward to entertaining you. So have a fantastic day, and once again, as always, later peoples, on to Jujutsu Kaisen, because man, One Piece has released a hit today, and now My Hero Academia has done the same. What a November, huh?